Hi again, guys. Welcome to part three of our installment of Imperialism readings from AMSCO. Just going over this to make sure that we're all okay before we move on to the progressive movement, which we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. Again, as you probably know, we're getting ready to push on through this last section. I know you're probably thinking, when's he going to stop doing that? If we look now, President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt is now President of the United States. We did the last part where we talked about how he was able to negotiate a treaty with the Panamanian government after engineering a revolution there to get them free of Colombia. So now we're kind of diverting from Latin America and South America, and we're moving over to East Asia. East Asia is a very tough place at this point in history. Right now, Russia and Japan, this is about 1904, they're engaged in a struggle to the death with one another over a lot of issues. We really won't cover those too much. We just look at it in the fact of how Roosevelt got the United States involved. At this point, when Russia and Japan are fighting, Japan's actually winning the war, and Russia's looking for kind of a way to save face. And so they eagerly accept President Roosevelt's offer to mediate their dispute and mediate the war in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1904. When they meet in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at that point in time, 1904, 1905, they eventually sign a peace treaty, and that ends the war. The problem was Roosevelt grows so frustrated with these guys. One of the readings we used to have would say that he had to keep his calm and keep his cool demeanor. He said, when I really wanted to get up and just take both their heads and crack them together. That's the kind of person Roosevelt was. He wanted solutions, he wanted boldness, he wanted decisiveness. The language of diplomacy was not really set up for him in a lot of respects. But at the end of the Treaty of Portsmouth, both sign it. Russia's glad because it ends the war, which is going disastrously for them. Japan is still a little upset, however, because they feel like in the treaty they don't get as much as they deserved. And that will just kind of plant a little bit of a seed of being unsettled with the United States that eventually, as we'll talk about later, will have some catastrophic consequences later on down the road. As we move forward, Roosevelt also jumps into what we call the Gentleman's Agreement. And this takes place in California, which was a large area of settlement for Japanese immigrants coming to the United States, primarily just because of location. San Francisco, as you remember, had also been a big port of call for a lot of Chinese immigrants who were coming here to work on the Central Pacific Railroad. When California began to adopt some discriminatory practices toward Japanese citizens, or as we would say now, Japanese Americans living here, one of the things they adopted, especially in San Francisco, was a system of segregated schools, whereby Japanese were not allowed to attend the normal San Francisco public schools. Well, this caused a major point of injury to Japanese pride, and they continued to complain to the United States about the treatment of their citizens, or their ex-citizens in this case. And Roosevelt was able to negotiate an agreement, again known as the Gentleman's Agreement, whereby California would slowly but surely repeal a lot of their discriminatory laws. And on the flip side, Japan would agree to limit outbound immigration to the United States from some of their citizens. Moving along a little bit more, to really kind of build upon the triumphs of Roosevelt, and you got to remember, he's already negotiated into a war. He's been able to repeal some discriminatory parts of California law. Later on, he'll actually get awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for ending this war. So Roosevelt really has put himself and the United States out on the national and international stage at this point by the middle of the first decade of the 20th century. Another thing that he jumps into as well is what he calls the Great White Fleet. To really seize upon this idea that the United States was a world power, he had an enormous fleet of U.S. battleships go sail around the world, and they were painted bright white, hence the name the Great White Fleet. Now, this fleet sails around the world. It takes them about a little under 2 years, from about 1907 to 1909, and they sail around the world, and really it's a way to project U.S. power and to show that there is a new player or a new kid on the block, so to speak. Shout out to the 90s band. And by doing so, they sail around the world. They show what kind of power the United States now has. And one of the places they're received with most joy is in Tokyo, where they're received by, in Tokyo Harbor, numerous Japanese citizens waving American flags. And this is just really kind of a new era for American diplomacy, and an idea that America now has a little muscle and is willing to show off that muscle a little bit on the world stage. Part of what we also talked about, too, with the Japanese was what we referred to as the Root Takahira Agreement. And really what this talks about more than anything else is that the United States and Japan, again, just kind of formalizing some treaties and trying to iron out some of the wrinkles in the relationship, they would agree to respect each other's territories in the Pacific, meaning no aggression. Foreshadowing about 34 years from now, guys. The other thing will be that they agreed to respect each other's integrity and trade opportunities in China with what we call the open door, support for that policy that has now been in effect just about close to 7 or 8 years. At the end of the day, if you're wrapping up this discussion on Roosevelt and big stick diplomacy, really what you need to take away from it is Roosevelt was not a warmonger. As much as we learned about his exploits during the Spanish-American War, he does look for peaceful resolutions, but underlying that idea of peaceful resolutions is the fact that we may be willing to use force if necessary. That's why he sends the Great White Fleet around, just to make sure people know that America is willing to use the force, but again, we'd prefer to talk it out, speak softly. TR will always advocate for American interest. And eventually he'll actually be awarded with, like we talked about, the Nobel Peace Prize, which is one of the very first ones ever awarded to an American. And again, talking about the transformation and the evolution of America. We're no longer going to be this isolationist country that worries about ourselves. We've really taken our first baby steps out on the world stage. For tomorrow, we're going to try to upload some more videos, more about the Progressive Era. You can actually look at the Progressive Era outline that I put on to Google Classroom, and those actually start from your AMSCO book. I'm looking at the pages as we speak right here, and that will start on page 431. Progressive Era is one of the most interesting and intriguing eras in American history. A lot of what we do today relates back to what happened a century ago with some of these reformers. So until then, please look over those notes, look at these videos, leave questions on Classroom, email me with questions. I know some people had a problem getting onto the Google Live chat today. We'll maybe drop back and punt on that and try to do a lot of our stuff through these videos and through Google Classroom. Again, please don't hesitate to ask questions. If you have anything that you need me to go over with you, I hope these make sense. I hope I didn't embarrass myself too much, and I hope that we get a chance to talk again real soon. And as we leave, I promised my assistant she can make a cameo in this video, and here she is right here. Come on in. This is my daughter, Emma Kate. Emma Kate, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
And say, a push on.
A push on.
All right, everybody. See you tomorrow. Bye.